Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The plasma cutter slipped, and Dan Marshall swore as molten metal splattered across his workbench. 3 in the morning was no time to be rebuilding a hoverbike's propulsion unit, but Mrs. Osei needed her delivery vehicle by dawn, and Dan needed her credits by yesterday. He reached for his coffee, cold, bitter, perfect, when someone hammered on his shop door hard enough to rattle the tool racks. Dan froze. Nobody came to his repair shop at this hour unless they were running from something or toward trouble. On Dune shift, those usually amounted to the same thing. The pounding came again, desperate now. Dan grabbed the wrench he kept under the counter, not much against a blaster, but its weight felt good in his hand. He hit the door release. A Veltrian woman stumbled through, her violet skin gleaming with sweat, carrying a small bundle that Dan realized was a child. The woman's silver hair hung in tangled ropes, and her expensive clothes were torn and stained with something dark that might have been blood. "Please," she gasped, her accent turning the word into music despite her desperation. "Just one night." Then her legs gave out. Dan caught her before she hit the ground, the child's weight making them both stagger. The kid, a girl, maybe 7 or 8, burned with fever against his chest. Her silver hair was matted, her breathing shallow. "Medical kits in the back," Dan said, already moving. "What happened?" "Poisoned," the woman managed, following him through the cluttered shop. 3 days ago. The fever won't break." Dan cleared his cot with one arm, still holding the child. The workshop's living quarters weren't much. A corner sectioned off with a tarp, a military surplus cot, a camp stove, but it was clean. He laid the girl down gently. "Veltrian metabolism runs cooler than human," he said, finding his med scanner. "Your normal might be our hypothermia. This fever could be killing her." The woman's hands clenched. "Do something." Dan was already loading a hypo with broad-spectrum antitox. "This is designed for humans. It might help, might do nothing, might make things worse." "She's dying anyway." Dan pressed the hypo to the child's neck. The girl didn't even flinch. They waited. 1 minute, 2. The scanner beeped, temperature dropping. Not much, but enough. "She needs fluids," Dan said, setting up an IV from his emergency supplies, "and rest, and probably a real doctor." "No doctors." The woman's voice turned sharp. "No authorities." "Lady, a kid shows up at my door poisoned, and you don't want—" "They'll kill her." The woman swayed, exhaustion catching up. "Please, I have credits, many credits. Just 1 night." Dan studied her. Up close, he could see the signs of hard travel, dehydration lines around her eyes, sand still crusted in the roots of her hair, the particular exhaustion that came from carrying a child across the desert. Whatever else she was, she'd nearly killed herself getting here. "Sit," he said, pushing a crate toward her. "You're no good to her if you pass out." She sat. He handed her water, watched her force herself to drink slowly when every instinct probably screamed to gulp. "I'm Dan," he said. "Sayira." She watched him check the girl's vitals. "That's every." "House names?" Sayira's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Not to me, but someone poisoned a kid. That's not random desert bandit behavior." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of Dan's ancient cooling unit and Every's labored breathing. Then Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "House Asterion." Dan's hand stilled on the scanner. House Asterion was old blood, the kind of Veltrian nobility that traced their lineage back to the colony ships. They'd all died in the evacuation of Veltos, or so everyone thought. "She's the last," Sarah confirmed, reading his expression. "And there are those who believe her death will bring the others back." "That's insane." "That's faith." Sarah's laugh held no humor. The Void cult follows the old prophecies. One speaks of the last daughter of Asterion. Before Dan could respond, Every stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, deep violet, like twilight on dune shift, and focused on Dan's face with surprising clarity. "You're fuzzy," she announced. Dan blinked. "What?" "Fuzzy, like a teddy bear, but prickly." "That's called stubble, kid." "Can I touch it?" Dan leaned closer. "Sure, but fair warning, it bites." Every giggled, the sound weak but genuine. "Silly. Beards don't have teeth." "This one's special." Dan made a chomping sound, and Every's giggle turned into a real laugh before a cough cut it short. Syra was at her side instantly. "Easy, little star. Don't strain yourself." "Syra, there was a man with red eyes," Every said, her voice small. "He gave me the bad juice. He's gone now. My legs feel weird." Dan ran the scanner down Every's spine and his stomach dropped. "Neural inhibitor. Someone dosed her with Carthax." Syra's face went pale, an impressive feat for someone already violent. "Can you fix it?" "I fix machines, not people." But Dan was already thinking. Carthax was nasty stuff, used in mining operations to paralyze rock borers. Low doses cause temporary paralysis. High doses. "My legs are sleeping," Every told him, matter of fact in the way only children could manage about terrible things. "Syra says they'll wake up when they're ready." "Smart lady," Dan said. "Do your legs ever sleep?" He sat back on his heels. "Only when I drink too much coffee and sit wrong." "Coffee makes legs sleep?" Every's nose scrunched. "That's backwards. Coffee's supposed to wake things up." "Everything's backwards on dune shift. We've got red sand instead of normal sand, 2 suns instead of 1, and the only ocean is 10 days' walk through the desert." "There's an ocean?" Every tried to sit up, wobbled, and let Syra ease her back down. "A real one? With water?" "Biggest body of water on the planet. Is it really bigger than a swimming pool?" Dan couldn't help but smile. "Bigger than 1,000,000 pools, kiddo." "1 million?" Her eyes went impossibly wide. "That's more than all my fingers and toes times infinity." "Times infinity plus 1. Every looked at Syra. "Can we see it? Please." "It's 10 days through the Whispering Desert," Dan said before Syra could answer. "With a kid who can't walk, that's a death sentence. The sand alone would—" "There are Veltrian doctors at the coast," Syra interrupted. "Specialists who might be able to reverse the Carthax damage." "Might?" "It's better than watching her deteriorate here." Syra's hand found Every's, their fingers intertwining. "The paralysis is progressive, without treatment." She didn't need to finish. Dan had seen Carthax poisoning before, in miners who'd gotten careless. First the legs, then the organs, then the lungs. 3 weeks, maybe 4. "I know the desert," Dan heard himself say. "Did supply runs for the military before I got smart and settled down." "Then you know it's possible. With proper equipment, sure. Enviro suits, a sand skimmer, plenty of water, none of which we have." Sarah pulled a credit chip from her torn jacket. 50,000. Dan nearly choked on his coffee. "That's enough to buy your shop 3 times over. Enough to get you off this planet if you wanted." She set the chip on his workbench. "All I need is a guide." Dan looked at the chip, then at Every, who was tracing patterns in the air with one finger, humming something that might have been a Veltrian lullaby. "The Void cult," he said. "They still after her? They think her death will fulfill the prophecy. When the last daughter of Asterion touches forbidden waters beneath alien stars, the old world dies and gates open to the new. And they think killing her accomplishes this how? The ocean. She's never touched it. They believe if she dies at the water's edge, it opens a portal to Veltos, brings back everyone who died in the evacuation." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Stupid things have started wars before. Dan couldn't argue with that. He'd fought in enough of them. He looked at Every again. She'd found his multi-tool and was holding it up to the light, watching the metal gleam. "It's pretty," she told him. "Like Sayura's hair in the morning." "Don't touch the—" Dan started, but Every had already found the button. The plasma blade ignited, casting blue light across her delighted face. Dan lunged forward, gently taking it from her hands. "Blade." "Sorry," Every said, not looking sorry at all. "I like things that glow." "You'd love the ocean at night then," Dan said without thinking. "Bioluminescent algae, whole waves light up blue and green." "Really?" Every's excitement was infectious. "Like stars but in water?" "Exactly like that." Every turned to Sayura with the kind of pleading expression that had probably started wars too. "Please? I want to see the star water." Dan watched Sayura crumble. The woman who'd stayed rigid talking about the cult, who'd kept her composure through exhaustion and fear, melted under the gaze of one 8-year-old. "We'll see," Sayura said softly. "That means no," Every informed Dan. "But sometimes it turns into yes if I'm really good." "Manipulative little thing, aren't you? What's manipulative mean?" "It means you're too smart for your own good." Every beamed like he'd given her a medal. Dan stood, decision made. "I've got an old military carrier system. Modified it for salvage runs. It's light enough that it won't sink in the sand, strong enough to carry gear. And—" He glanced at Every. "Passengers. You'll take us?" "I'll take you, but we do this my way. We travel at night when it's cooler, rest during the heat of the day, and if I say we stop, we stop. If I say we run, we run. No questions." "Of course. And the kid needs to be ready for hard travel. This isn't some tourist excursion." "I'm tough," Every piped up. "I didn't cry when the red-eyed man gave me the bad juice. Only a little, and not where he could see." Something twisted in Dan's chest. "Yeah, kid, you're tough." He spent the next 2 hours modifying the carrier while Sayura helped Every eat some nutrient paste. "It tastes like sand." "Everything tastes like sand here, kiddo." The carrier was his own design, a lightweight frame that distributed weight across his shoulders and back, with a seat that could hold a small passenger. He'd used it to haul salvage, never a person, never a child. "Why are you helping us?" Sayura asked while Every dozed. Dan didn't look up from his work. "Maybe I'm an idiot who can't say no to puppy eyes. I'm serious." "So am I. You seen those eyes? Kid could ask me to fight a sandworm and I'd probably grab a stick." "There's more to it." Dan set down his tools. "I had a daughter, back on Earth, before I enlisted. She'd be about Every's age now." "Had?" "Custody goes to the parent who doesn't ship off to fight in 3 different systems." He picked up the tools again. "Haven't seen her in 4 years." "I'm sorry. Don't be. My choice. Series of choices, actually. All bad ones." "And this? Is this a bad choice?" Dan tested the carrier's straps. "Probably, but at least this time I'm making it for the right reasons." As dawn approached, painting the red sand outside his shop a deeper crimson, Dan made final preparations. Water purification tablets, protein bars, emergency beacon he probably wouldn't use, the ancient projectile rifle he definitely would if necessary. Every woke as he was loading the last supplies. "Are we going to see the ocean now?" "Not yet, kid. Gotta wait for sunset. Desert's too hot during the day." "Oh." She considered this. "Is it really hot? Like burn your feet hot? Like melt your shoes hot? Like cook an egg on a rock hot?" "That's really hot." "That's why we travel at night. We'll be like backwards people. Sleep when the sun's up, walk when the stars are out." "I like stars," Every said. "Sayura knows all their names. Do you know their names?" "I know some. The navigation ones anyway." "Will you teach me?" "Sure." Promise? Dan looked at this strange violet child with her silver hair and trusting eyes, paralyzed by poison, hunted by fanatics, and somehow still excited about stars and oceans. Yeah, kid, I promise. The first night's travel went better than Dan expected. Every rode on his back, her weight negligible compared to the combat packs he'd once carried. She chattered for the first hour, pointing out every rock formation and asking if they were almost there yet every 10 minutes. Then she fell asleep, her head heavy against his shoulder, breath warm on his neck. Sarah walked beside them, alert despite her exhaustion. She moved well in the sand, better than most off-worlders. You've done this before, Dan observed. I trained for 6 months before coming to Dune Shift. I knew we might need to run. 6 months? How long have you been planning this? Since Evry's parents died. Saira adjusted her pack. I was her tutor, language and arts. When the assassination happened, I was giving her a painting lesson. We hid in the supply closet while they killed everyone else. And you've been running since. 14 months. 3 planets. I thought Dune Shift would be far enough. She laughed bitterly. Edge of nowhere. Who would look here? Fanatics are nothing if not persistent. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps in sand and Evry's occasional sleepy murmur. The twin moons cast everything in silver and shadow, turning the desert into an alien moonscape, which, Dan supposed, it technically was. She asks about her parents sometimes, Sarah said suddenly. What am I supposed to tell her? That they died because some people believe in prophecies more than life? You tell her they loved her. Everything else can wait until she's older. Is that what you tell yourself? About your daughter? Dan's step faltered slightly. That's different. Is it? Her mother tells her I abandoned them, and she's not wrong. You send credits? Every month. Then you haven't abandoned anything. You're just loving from a distance. Dan wanted to argue, but Evry chose that moment to wake up. Are we there yet? No, kid. How about now? Still no. Now? Despite everything, the danger, the desert, the insanity of what they were attempting, Dan found himself smiling. Tell you what, see that rock formation? The one that looks like a sleeping giant? Evry squinted. Yeah. When we reach that, we'll be 1/10 of the way there. How much is 1/10? If the whole trip was a pizza, 1/10 would be 1 slice. Oh, so we need 10 slices to get to the ocean. Exactly. I like pizza. Do they have pizza at the ocean? The best pizza. Better than sand pizza? Is sand pizza a thing? No, but everything here has sand in it, so I figured. Saira actually laughed, a real laugh, not the bitter thing from earlier. She has a point. I found sand in my sealed ration pack yesterday. Sand gets everywhere, Dan agreed. It's coarse and rough and irritating. And it gets everywhere, Evry finished, giggling. You said that twice. Because it's twice as true. As they walked on through the night, Dan realized something had shifted. 3 strangers thrown together by circumstances that none of them would have chosen, walking through a desert toward an uncertain future. But for this moment, under the alien stars, with Evry making up songs about sand pizza and Saira occasionally humming harmony, it felt almost like something else. It felt like hope. The sandstorm hit on their 4th day like a living thing with teeth. Dan heard it coming before he saw it. A low rumble that vibrated through his boots, the kind of sound that made desert rats board up their shops and pray. The horizon had turned brown-black, a wall of sand 300 feet high racing toward them across the flats. Cave system, half a click northeast, Dan shouted over the rising wind, already adjusting Evry's position on his back. Move! They ran. Dan's muscles burning under Evry's weight, sand beginning to sting exposed skin like tiny needles. The cave mouth appeared through the haze, a dark gash in a red rock outcropping. Dan pushed Syra through first, then squeezed in with Every still clinging to him. The storm hit seconds later, turning day to night. "The sand sounds angry," Every whimpered against Dan's shoulder, "like it's yelling at us." "It's just wind, kiddo." Dan set her down gently, checking the cave depth with his flashlight. 15 feet deep, no back exit. They'd be trapped until the storm passed. "Wind shouldn't scream." Every pressed her hands over her ears. "I don't like it." The cave shook as the storm intensified. Sand poured through the entrance like water, already forming a small dune. Dan pulled out his emergency tarp and began securing it across the opening, but the wind kept ripping it away. "Here." Syra grabbed one corner. Together they managed to anchor it with rocks. It wouldn't keep everything out, but it would keep them from being buried alive. Every huddled against the back wall, making herself small. Dan shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The jacket swallowed her, making her look even younger than 8. "Know what I do when I'm scared?" Dan sat beside her. "You get scared?" Her violet eyes went wide. "Everyone does, even tough guys with scratchy beards. When I was in the military, stuck in a foxhole during bombardment, I'd count stupid things." "Like what?" "Like how many purple people I've met." Despite her fear, Every's mouth quirked. "2. Me and Syra." "See? Storm's not so bad when you're counting. What else can we count?" Rocks. There's 1, 2, 3, 17. Wait, is that 1 rock or 2 stuck together?" "Definitely 2. They counted rocks, then cracks in the ceiling, then the number of times the tarp flapped. Every gave up at 47. Gradually, her trembling stopped. Dan felt her relax against his side, her breathing steadying. "Dan," she said after a while, "do you think the sand is lonely? Maybe that's why it screams. It's trying to find other sand to be friends with." "That's a nicer way to think about it than mine." "What's yours? That the planet's trying to kill us." "That's not nice at all." But probably more accurate. Sarah had been checking their supplies, but now she moved closer, sitting on Every's other side. In the dim light filtering through the tarp, her violet skin looked like deep water. "Tell us a story," Every demanded. "Syra tells the best stories." "They're just old Veltrian tales," Syra said. "Tell the one about the star whale." As Syra began, something about a creature that swam between worlds, eating light and singing cosmic songs, Dan watched them. Every had curled into Syra's side, eyes heavy despite the storm. Syra's voice carried a melody even in normal speech, but when she told stories, it became hypnotic. The storm raged for 6 hours. Every fell asleep after the 3rd story, her small hand clutching Dan's jacket. Sarah carefully shifted her to lie across both their laps, the child's paralyzed legs supported by Dan's knees. "She hasn't smiled this much since her parents died," Syra said quietly. "She's a tough kid." "So's her protector." Sarah's hand found his in the darkness, her skin cool against his warmth. "Both of them." "I'm just the transportation." "No." Her fingers intertwined with his. "You're more than that. You don't see how she looks at you, like you're some kind of hero from her stories." "I'm nobody's hero." "You are to her, to us." Dan turned to respond, but Syra was closer than he'd expected. Close enough that he could see the silver flecks in her violet eyes, like stars in a twilight sky. Close enough to feel her breath on his face. The moment stretched between them, taut as wire. Then Every shifted in her sleep, mumbling something about sand pizza, and they both looked away. When the storm finally passed, they emerged to find the landscape transformed. Dunes had shifted, familiar landmarks erased. Dan checked his compass, did some calculations. "We lost half a day," he said, "but we can make it up if we push harder tonight." "I can walk faster," Every offered from his back as they set out again. "Oh, wait. No, I can't." She giggled at her own joke, but Dan caught the sadness underneath. Day 5 dawned clear and brutal. They'd made good time during the night, but Dan's water calculations were troubling him. If they maintained their current pace, they'd run out with 2 days left to go. He didn't mention this to Syra. They were settling into their daytime camp, a shallow depression that offered minimal shade, when a figure appeared on the ridge above them. Dan had his rifle up before the figure raised its hands in a gesture of peace. "I come alone," the figure called in accented English. "I wish only to talk." It was a Veltrian male, older, wearing the deep blue robes of a religious office. As he descended toward them, Dan noted the way grief had carved lines into his face, the way his silver hair had gone white at the temples. "Zarek," Syra hissed, pulling Every behind her. "High Seeker Zarek," the man corrected gently, though titles matter little in the desert. He stopped 10 feet away, hands still visible. "Hello, Every." Every peeked around Syra. "Hello, you look sad." Something flickered across Zarek's face. "I am sad, child." "Please, Syra." Zarek's composure cracked slightly. "One child's sacrifice returns thousands. My Lyria was Every's age when the ships failed. 8 years, 3 months, 11 days. Your daughter is dead, Zarek." Syra stepped forward, fury radiating from every line of her body. "Killing Every won't bring her back." The prophecy is words. Ancient words written by people who are also dead. You want to add a living child to that body count? "You're sad about your little girl?" Every asked, wheeling herself forward slightly despite Syra's attempt to hold her back. Zarek froze, his carefully maintained control shattering for a moment. Yes. My mommy and daddy are gone too." Every's voice was matter-of-fact, the way children discuss terrible truths. "But Syra says they're in the stars now. Maybe your girl is there too? Do you see her when you look up?" Zarek's face twisted, pain and rage warring across his features. "The prophecy will return her. When the last daughter touches the forbidden waters, the gates will open. The dead will return." "But I'm not dead," Every pointed out with 8-year-old logic. "So how can I be with the dead people?" "Your death at the water creates the bridge." "That's stupid," Every interrupted. "Dead people can't build bridges. They don't have hammers." Despite everything, Dan snorted. Even Sarah's mouth twitched. Zarek's expression hardened. "You mock sacred texts." "She's 8, Dan said. "She's not mocking anything. She's being logical, something your cult could try." "You understand nothing, human. You didn't lose your world." "No. I just lost my family the old-fashioned way, by being an idiot." Zarek studied him for a long moment. "They say you were a soldier." Then you understand sacrifice. Would you not give your life to save your unit?" "My life? Yes. An innocent kid's life? Never. Even if that one life saved millions. That math only works if you're certain about the outcome. You're betting a real child's life against a maybe. That's not sacrifice. That's murder with extra steps." Zarek's hand moved to his belt. Dan tensed, but the Seeker only pulled out a water bottle, taking a small sip. "We will meet again," Zarek said finally. "The faithful are many. You cannot run forever." "Watch us," Syra said. Zarek looked at Every one more time. "You have your mother's eyes, child." "My mother's dead," Every said simply. "But Syra says I have her smile. Want to see?" She smiled broadly, showing a missing tooth. Zarek turned away quickly, but not before Dan caught the moisture in his eyes. The Seeker walked back the way he'd come, his robes billowing in the desert wind. "He's not giving up," Syra said once he was gone. "No," Dan agreed, "but he's doubting. That's something." They pushed harder that night, Dan forcing the pace despite his screaming muscles. He knew Zarek hadn't come alone. Somewhere out there, cultists were tracking them, waiting for the right moment. It came just after midnight on the sixth day. The skimmers came out of nowhere, 3 of them, light enough to float on the sand, fast enough that running was pointless. Dan had just enough time to push Every behind a rock formation before the first energy bolt sizzled past his head. "Stay down!" he shouted, rifle already up and firing. The projectile weapons were primitive compared to energy weapons, but they had advantages. No power cells to run dry, no delicate components to break, and the psychological effect of bullets spanging off rocks was considerable. Syra had produced a blade from somewhere, curved, elegant, deadly. She moved like liquid, using the terrain to her advantage. When one cultist got too close, she flowed up and over his skimmer, her blade finding the gap in his armor before he could react. Dan dropped another with a headshot, the rifle bucking against his shoulder. The third cultist tried to flank them, but Dan had expected that. He rolled left, came up firing, caught the cultist center mass. Then silence. "Clear," Dan called, already moving toward Every's position. She was curled into a ball, hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. "You got hurt because of me," she sobbed as Dan checked her for injuries. "If I was dead, you'd be okay." Dan grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "Never say that. Never. You hear me? But the cult says, the cult is wrong. You're worth 1,000,000 prophecies." Sarah dropped to her knees beside them, pulling Every into a fierce embrace. "You're my child. Mine. And I'll fight the whole universe to keep you safe." "But you're bleeding." Dan looked. Syra had a gash along her ribs, blood staining her torn shirt. His own shoulder burned where an energy bolt had grazed it. "Just scratches," he said. "We've had worse from Every's cooking." "I don't cook." "Exactly. That's why we've had worse." Every giggled through her tears, a watery sound that made Dan's chest tight. They treated their wounds with the medical supplies, neither injury serious but both painful. Dan noticed how carefully Sarah moved, how she kept the pain from showing when Every was watching. "You fought well," he told her while Every dozed. "I had good teachers." "Military?" "My brother. He was house guard before." She trailed off. "Before the evacuation?" "Before he chose to stay behind, to make sure the children's ship launched safely." Dan understood then. It wasn't just about Every. It was about all the children who hadn't made it, about second chances and redemption and the weight of survival. That night, while Every slept between them, Syra broke the silence. "She can walk." Dan's hand stilled on his rifle. "What?" "The paralysis wore off a couple of days ago," Sarah said. "Carthax burned out. I hit her with an antidote the moment she was dosed. I'm sorry I didn't tell you." "Why haven't you told her?" "How do I explain that being weak won't save her? She's 8, Dan. She lost everyone. Parents, uncles, cousins, everyone she'd ever known. I'm all she has." Syra's voice caught. "And I'm not even her real mother. I was her tutor, art and languages. I taught her to paint flowers that don't exist anymore." Dan shifted to face her across Every's sleeping form. "You're more real than any blood parent could be." "You don't understand. I'm making this up as I go. Every decision, every lie, every truth I don't tell her. What if I'm ruining her?" "You're keeping her alive. That's enough." "Is it? What kind of life am I giving her? Running, hiding, pretending to be paralyzed so murderers might hesitate?" Dan reached across Every, his hand finding Syra's face in the darkness. The kind where she still laughs, still makes jokes about sand pizza, still smiles at sad old men who want to kill her. "You're not ruining her. You're saving her soul." Sarah leaned into his touch. "I'm terrified, Dan, every moment, that I'll fail her, that they'll take her, that I'll wake up and she'll be gone." "She won't be. You can't promise that." "Watch me." He shifted closer, careful not to wake Every. I promise you, both of you, we're getting to that ocean. She's going to play in those waves, and anyone who tries to stop that is going through me. Dan, I mean it. Their lips met across the sleeping child, desperate, hungry, a promise sealed in flesh. Sayira tasted like hope and fear and something uniquely her, spice and starlight and strength. When they parted, both breathing hard, every mumbled in her sleep. No kissing. Gross. They muffled their laughter in their hands, the moment of terror and passion breaking into something softer, something that felt dangerously close to family. Day 8 dawned with trouble. They'd stopped at what should have been Way Station 7, a supply cache Dan had used during his military days. Instead, they found smoking ruins and fresh skimmer tracks. A message written in the sand, "Give us the child." "They're hurting us," Dan said, studying the tracks, pushing us toward the narrow pass. "Then we go around. That adds 3 days. We don't have the water. Then we go through." Dan looked at her, really looked. Exhaustion painted shadows under her eyes. Dehydration had begun to crack her lips, but her spine was steel. "It's an ambush." "I know." Sarah shifted every higher on the carrier. The girl had been quiet all morning, processing the violence of the night before. "But what choice do we have?" As they approached the pass, a narrow canyon between towering red rocks, Dan counted at least 6 hidden positions. His rifle had 8 rounds left. Not enough. "I have an idea," Sarah said, "but you're going to hate it." She explained quickly, and Dan did hate it. But as the first cultists emerged from hiding, surrounding them with weapons drawn, he had to admit it was brilliant. Syra stepped forward, pulling a knife from her belt, but instead of threatening the cultists, she pressed it to her own throat. "Want the prophecy?" Her voice carried across the canyon. "I'm also House Asterion, the cousin branch. My grandmother was sister to Evry's great-grandfather. I'm a daughter of Asterion, too." The cultists muttered, uncertain. One called out, "The prophecy speaks of the last daughter." "And I am." Syra pressed the knife harder, a bead of purple blood rolling down her neck. "Kill me by water." She gestured to the canteens on Dan's belt. "And your prophecy is fulfilled. Unless you're not sure, unless you need the specific child. But then how do you know? Did you run genetic tests? Do you have proof she's the last?" The theological debate that erupted gave Dan the opening he needed. He'd been slowly positioning himself, marking targets. When Syra made her move, a theatrical stumble that knocked over 2 cultists, Dan was ready. The fight was fast, brutal, efficient. Dan's military training against religious zealots who'd spent more time studying prophecy than combat. Syra's blade sang through the air, her movements a deadly dance. When the dust settled, they were through the pass, leaving confused and unconscious cultists arguing about genealogy and interpretation. "That was insane," Dan panted as they ran, "but it worked. You could have died. So could you. Every day. That's what this is, Dan, choosing how we might die so she can live." From his back, Evry spoke for the first time in hours. "I don't want anyone to die for me." "Then it's a good thing we're very hard to kill," Dan said. "Like cockroaches, but prettier." "Syra's pretty. You're just okay." "Just okay?" "Maybe okay and a half." "I'll take it." As the 8th day ended and they made camp with only 2 days left to go, Dan watched Syra teaching Evry a Veltrian lullaby. The girl's voice was sweet but off-key, and she kept forgetting the words, but Syra's patience never wavered. They'd covered more than half the distance, survived storms and cultists and crisis of faith. But Dan knew the hardest part was coming. Zarek was still out there, gathering forces. The final push to the ocean would be the most dangerous. But tonight, watching purple fingers intertwined as they sang, watching Evry's eyes droop with exhaustion and trust, Dan made a decision. They weren't just going to survive this, They were going to win it. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side as something more than three strangers bound by circumstance. Maybe they'd come out as family. The canyon walls pressed in like a closing fist as Dan counted hostiles. 23 cultists positioned on both rims, weapons trained downward. Zarek stood at the choke point ahead, no longer the grieving father who'd visited their camp. Now he wore authority-like armor, his blue robes replaced with tactical gear that meant business. Tactical assessment, Dan muttered to Sarah. We're fucked. Language, Every whispered from the carrier. We're thoroughly inconvenienced. Better. Zarek raised his hand and the cultist tensed. There's no escape, Syra. The prophecy will be fulfilled today. The prophecy says nothing about today, Syra called back. I've read the original text. Interpretation is everything. Convenient interpretation is murder. Dan's mind raced through options. The canyon narrowed ahead, 15 feet at its tightest point. Rock walls, sheer and crumbling. His rifle had 6 rounds left. The math didn't work. Then, Every shifted on his back. Dan, put me down. Not happening, kiddo. Please. I need to talk to him. Every, trust me. Something in her voice made Dan comply. He lowered the carrier, keeping his body between her and the weapons above. Every gripped the carrier's frame, pulling herself forward until she could see Zarek clearly. Your little girl Lyria, she called, her child's voice echoing off stone. She wouldn't want you to hurt other kids. Zarek's composure cracked. Silence. Dead people don't want more dead people. Every's words carried the simple wisdom that only children could manage. My mommy and daddy visit my dreams. They say, be happy, Every. They say, make friends. They never say, die for us. You know nothing of loss. I know everything about it. I wake up sometimes and forget they're gone, and then I remember, and it hurts all over again, like my chest is breaking into tiny pieces. Dan felt Syra tense beside him. Above them, several cultists shifted uncertainly. But you know what? Every continued. Killing me won't unbreak your chest. It'll just break mine too. Zarek stepped forward, blade materializing in his hand. The prophecy must be fulfilled. His voice cracked with desperation. That's when Every did something that stopped everyone cold. She stood up. Her legs, supposedly paralyzed for weeks, held her weight. She took one wobbling step forward, then another. The carrier clattered to the ground. Gasps echoed through the canyon. Weapons wavered. I can walk, Every whispered, tears streaming down her face. I could always walk. The poison wore off a couple of days ago. I'm sorry, Dan. I lied. I thought if I was broken, they wouldn't want to break me more. Dan's chest constricted. The kid had been pretending this entire time, carrying that weight alone. He wanted to be angry, should have been angry, but all he felt was a fierce need to protect this brave, terrified child. So? Dan scooped her up, her legs dangling. You still have short legs, too slow for running. You're not mad? Oh, I'm furious. But that's for later. Right now, we run. There's nowhere to run, Zarek said, but uncertainty colored his tone. That's when Dan noticed it. A rope anchor he'd placed years ago, military grade, drilled into the canyon wall. Still there. Still solid. Every, he whispered. Remember when I taught you about knots? The bunny goes around the tree? Time to be the bunny. Understanding flashed across her face. She was small, light, flexible. The rope would hold her. Now! Dan shouted. In one motion, he tossed Every toward the wall. Her hands found the rope, and she shimmed up with the agility of someone who'd never been paralyzed at all. The cultists surged forward, focused on what looked like a child scaling an impossible cliff. They didn't see Every slip sideways into a hidden crevice. They didn't see the second rope, pre-placed, that let her rappel down the far side. What they saw was her fall, a controlled drop that looked like disaster. No, Zarek rushed to the edge. That's when Syra exploded. Not with the deadly grace she'd shown before. This was pure rage, maternal fury given form. She slammed into Zarek like a meteor, driving him into the ground. Her fists found his face again and again, each blow punctuated by a scream. "Don't touch my daughter!" Zarek tried to defend himself, but Sayira was beyond technique, beyond training. She was every mother who'd ever faced a threat to her child, distilled into violence. Dan had to physically haul her off, her nails leaving gouges in his arms as she fought to get back to Zarek. "He's down! Sayira, he's down! Let me go! I'll kill him! Mommy?" Every's voice, small and scared, came from behind a boulder 20 feet away. She'd circled back, the fall just a ruse. The fight went out of Syra instantly. She pulled free from Dan and ran to Every, catching the girl as she jumped into her arms. "You called me Mommy. Is that okay?" "It's perfect." The cultists stood frozen, weapons lowered, watching their leader struggle to sit up. Zarek's face was a ruin of purple bruises, blood streaming from his nose. "The child lives," one cultist said unnecessarily. "The prophecy." Another began, then trailed off. Dan kept his rifle ready but didn't aim. Something had shifted in the canyon's energy. The certainty that had driven these people was cracking. "Move aside," Dan commanded. To his surprise, they did. They walked through the confused ranks of cultists, Dan carrying Every again despite her protests that she could walk. "My legs work fine, but mine work better. Plus, you're grounded." "What? Why?" "For lying about being paralyzed. That's at least a week of grounding." "You can't ground me. You're not my dad." "Want to bet?" Every considered this. "Can I be ungrounded if I'm really good?" "Negotiating already? You'll make a terrible teenager." "Sayira, Dan's being mean." "Dan's being a father," Sayira corrected, her hand finding his arm. "Get used to it." They climbed through the day, the ocean's salt tang growing stronger with each hour. Dan's shoulders screamed, his water was gone, and his feet had blistered inside his boots. But Every kept up a running commentary that made the pain bearable. "Do fish sleep? Where do they put their pillows? Can they dream if they don't have eyelids?" "Fish don't need pillows, kiddo." "Everything needs pillows. Even rocks probably want pillows, but can't say so." "That's actually kind of sad, right? We should make tiny pillows for sad rocks." "After we survive this, you can start a rock pillow business." "Deal." As the second sun reached its zenith on the 10th day, they crested the final dune. The ocean spread before them like spilled emerald silk, stretching to meet the orange sky at a horizon that seemed impossible far away. Waves rolled in endless rhythm, their foam catching the light like scattered diamonds. Every went completely still on Dan's back. It's... She struggled for words. "Everywhere water." Dan set her down and she stood on her own legs, trembling not from weakness but from wonder. "Can I touch it?" "That's why we came." She took one step, then stopped. Behind them, footsteps crunched in sand. Zarek stood at the dune's peak, alone, his face still bearing Syra's fury. But his weapons were gone, his hands empty. "Do it, child," he said, his voice hollow. "Touch the water. Prove I destroyed my soul for nothing." Every looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the ocean's edge, her small footprints marking the sand. At the waterline, she turned back. "When I touch the water, the old world really will die." Everyone tensed. The world where people hate each other for being different, where kids die for grown-up mistakes, where sad people make others sad because they don't know what else to do. She looked directly at Zarek. "And a new world starts, where Dan is my daddy and Sayira is my mommy, and we're happy. where you remember your daughter with love instead of anger, where the prophecy means what it always meant, that things change when we choose to change them. She jumped into the waves. The water exploded around her in a shower of droplets that caught the light like falling stars. She shrieked with delight, splashing and kicking, her laughter carrying across the beach. Nothing else happened. No portals, no returning dead, no cosmic transformation, just a little girl playing in the ocean for the first time. Zarek fell to his knees in the sand, shoulders shaking. "Lyria, forgive me. What have I become?" Every splashed back to shore, soaking wet and grinning. She marched up to Zarek with the determination of someone who decided something important. "It's okay to be sad," she told him, water dripping from her silver hair. "But being sad doesn't mean making others sad too. That just makes more sad, and then everyone's sad, and that's too much sad." I wanted her back so badly. She is back. Every time you remember something nice about her, every time you help someone because she would have wanted you to. That's how dead people come back, in the good stuff we do. Dan helped Zarek stand, surprised by how light the man felt. Grief had hollowed him out. "The kid's right," Dan said. "You want redemption? Start by living with what you've done, then fix it." "How?" "Help other kids, ones who lost parents in the evacuation. Give them what your daughter can't have anymore." Zarek looked at Evri, who was already back in the waves, trying to catch them in her hands. "The prophecy," he said slowly. "It was never about portals." "Duh," Evri called over her shoulder. "New worlds aren't places. They're choices. Dan taught me that." "I did? Yesterday. You said we could choose to be scared or choose to be brave." "That was about the canyon." "Same thing." Dan felt Syra's hand slip into his. "She's right, you know." "About the prophecy?" "About you teaching her." She leaned against him, her weight warm and solid. "You've been teaching her since the moment we met. How to be brave, how to laugh when things are scary, how to trust." Pretty sure she already knew all that. "Maybe, but you reminded her it was okay to show it." They watched Evri try to build a sandcastle, only for the waves to wash it away. Instead of crying, she laughed and started again, building it higher up the beach. "She called you Mommy," Dan said. "She did. How does that feel?" "Terrifying. Perfect. Like everything I never knew I wanted." "And me being Daddy?" Syra turned to face him fully. "I think you've been Daddy since you carried her out of your shop. We've known each other 10 days. So? That's insane. Everything about this is insane. We crossed a desert with a fake paralyzed child while being chased by prophecy-obsessed cultists. Sanity isn't really our strong suit." Dan laughed, pulling her closer. "Fair point." "Dan, Sayira, look." Evri had found something in the sand. A shell, spiral, and perfect. "It's like a tiny house. Do tiny fish live in it?" "Hermit crabs, actually," Dan called back. "Crabs can be hermits? That's so sad. We should find him friends." Or maybe he likes being alone. Nobody likes being alone. Even hermit crabs probably want friends but don't know how to ask. Dan looked at Zarek, still standing uncertainly at the water's edge. "Hey kid, show Zarek your shell." Evri bounded over, grabbing Zarek's hand without hesitation. "Come see. It's beautiful and spirally, and Dan says a lonely crab lives in it." Zarek let himself be pulled toward the water, his expression stunned. This child he'd tried to kill was sharing her discovery with him like he was just another adult to be included. "Children don't hold grudges properly," Sarah observed. "It's their superpower." "Think he'll cause more trouble? Look at him." Zarek was kneeling in the sand, letting Evri pour water over his hands to wash off the grit, listening intently as she explained her theory about sad rocks needing pillows. "I think she broke him," Sarah said, "in the best possible way." As the suns began their descent toward the water, Painting the ocean in shades of copper and gold, Dan made a decision. There's a settlement about 2 clicks south, New Haven. They have medical facilities, food, actual beds. And then we figure out what comes next, together. Together, Saira agreed. Together, Every shouted, having apparently been eavesdropping. She ran at them full speed, jumping into a hug that nearly knocked them over. Easy, kiddo. We're old and fragile. You're not old. Zarek's old. You're just medium. Thanks, I think. Every looked up at them, her violet eyes bright with certainty. We're a family now, right? For real? Dan and Saira exchanged glances over her wet hair. Yeah, kiddo, Dan said. For real. Good. Because I already told Zarek you're my parents and it would be really embarrassing if you said no. When did you? Just now. He said congratulations and then made a weird crying face. They looked back at Zarek, who was indeed crying but also smiling, a complicated expression that somehow worked. The prophecy, he called to them. I finally understand it. Yeah? Dan called back. The old world did die. The world where I was so lost in grief I'd kill a child. And the new world, he gestured to them standing together in the surf. It's this. It's choosing love over loss. It's what Lyria would have wanted. Every splashed back to him, tugging his hand. Come in the water. It's warm and the waves tickle. I haven't swum in years. Then you really need to. Dan says people get crusty if they don't swim enough. I never said that. You said something like it. I said people get crusty when they don't bathe, which is completely... A wave chose that moment to crash over all of them, cutting off Dan's protest. They came up sputtering, every shrieking with delight, Saira laughing, even Zarek managing a chuckle. See? Every announced. The ocean wants us all to be uncrusty. As they stood there, soaked and sandy and impossibly far from where they'd started, Dan realized the kid was right. Not about the crusty part, though maybe that too, but about the prophecy. The old world had died. The world where Dan was alone in his shop, where Saira was just a tutor, where Every was an orphan target. The new world was this, messy and wet and uncertain, but theirs. Race you to that rock, Every challenged, pointing to an outcropping 50 feet away. You're on, Dan said. No fair. You have longer legs. You have younger legs. Saira has the nicest legs. Every. What? It's true. As they splashed through the shallows, chasing an 8-year-old who'd somehow saved them all with nothing but honesty and hope, Dan thought about prophecies and choices and the family you find in the most unexpected places. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, vast and full of possibilities, just like their new world, just like their new life, together. 5 years later, from the private journal of every Asterian marshal, age 13, definitely not a kid anymore. Dear future me, or whoever's snooping through my stuff, yes, Lily, I mean you. When I was 8, I thought I was so tough. Looking back at the photos Mom keeps on the mantle, I was just this tiny purple bean with tangled silver hair and eyes too big for my face. I pretended I couldn't walk because I thought being broken would save me. Spoiler alert, being whole saved me. Being loved saved me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dad says I always do that. I'm 13 now, practically an adult. I can make pancakes without setting off the smoke alarm, usually. I've read every book in New Haven's library, even the boring ones about desert agriculture, and I only have nightmares about the cult maybe once a month instead of every night. So yeah, totally grown up. We live in this ridiculous house now. Dad calls it accidentally enormous. We just kept adding rooms every time we had extra credits. 3 kitchens because of the pancake incident of year 2 and the cake catastrophe of year 3. 5 bathrooms, Mom insisted after the time we all got food poisoning from my experimental casserole. And a workshop that's bigger than Dad's old shop. The whole thing sits on the cliff overlooking the ocean, and at night, when the bioluminescent algae light up, it looks like the stars fell into the water and decided to swim. Oh, and we're rich now. Not buy a moon rich, but we have actual furniture that matches rich. Turns out when a human mechanic and a Veltrian scholar put their brains together, magic happens. They started Starwater Innovations. Dad builds the machines. Mom handles the business side. They make everything from water purifiers that work in any atmosphere to these beautiful memorial lamps that people put in the ocean for lost loved ones. The lamps float on the waves and glow different colors based on the memories you program into them. Zarek bought the first 1,000 for the Veltos Memorial. Now everyone wants them. But the absolute best part of being rich? Summer. That's when Lily comes. Dad's Earth daughter. My sister. My sister. When Dad first told me about her, I threw up. Not from disgust or anything, just pure terror. What if she hated me? What if she thought I'd stolen her dad? What if she was perfect and made me look like the disaster I actually am? I spent 3 months before her first visit practicing what to say. Mom caught me talking to my reflection once. "Hello, Lily. I'm Every. I didn't steal your dad. He just kind of collected me like a sad stray cat, and now I live here. Please don't hate me." Mom laughed so hard she cried. But when Lily's shuttle landed that first summer, she ran straight to me, not Dad, Maine, and hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "Finally," she whispered in my ear. "I always wanted a little sister." "I'm not little," I protested. "I'm only 3 years younger." She pulled back, grinned. She has Dad's smile but with better teeth, and said, "You're little to me, Squirt." And that was it. Instant sister. Like she'd been waiting for me as long as I'd been waiting for her. Now she comes every summer for 3 months. We share my room even though she has her own. We stay up until dawn talking about everything. She tells me about Earth. Apparently, water just falls from the sky there. Insane. And I tell her about the cult and the desert and how Dad carried me when I pretended I couldn't walk. She's the only one who gets to borrow my hoodies. She's the only one who can call me Squirt without getting a fork thrown at them. She's teaching me to braid my hair in Earth styles, and I'm teaching her Veltrian curse words that make Mom gasp and Dad snort laugh. Last night, she said something that made me cry. Happy tears. Shut up. We were sitting on the roof, watching the ocean glow, and she goes, "You know what's funny? I spent years hating Dad for leaving, but if he hadn't, he wouldn't have found you. And if he hadn't found you, I wouldn't have the best sister in the galaxy. So maybe everything happens exactly how it's supposed to." I ugly cried. She ugly cried. We ate an entire container of Mom's hidden chocolate stash and blamed it on Dad. Speaking of family dynamics, mornings are still chaos. This morning, for example, "Dad! Mom! I made breakfast!" I yelled. Dad walked in, saw the kitchen, and just stood there. How? How does pancake batter end up on the ceiling? Every single time. "I added acceleration gel. You said it makes things go faster." "That's for engines, Every. Engines." Mom was laughing so hard she had to sit down. The prophecy missed this part. The last daughter of Asterion shall destroy every kitchen in the known universe. It's not destroyed. It's artistically redecorated. "Is that what we're calling it?" Lily asked from the doorway, phone out, already recording for her Earth friends. "Hey, Earth, this is why my alien sister isn't allowed near your food." "Betrayal!" I shrieked, chasing her with a batter-covered spatula. The kitchen may be a disaster zone, but the rest of our life is pretty perfect. Dad still fixes things, but now he fixes important things. Water systems for refugee camps, atmospheric processors for new colonies. Mom runs the business side and somehow convinced 3 different governments to fund our research. She also teaches Veltrian art at the local school and pretends she doesn't notice when Dad watches her with that dopey look on his face. Zarek visits 4 times a year. He runs the Lyria Foundation now. It helps war orphans from all species find families. He's placed over 300 kids so far. He still looks sad sometimes, especially when he watches me play in the ocean, but it's a soft sadness now, the kind that hurts but doesn't destroy. I would have killed you, he told me last visit. I would have murdered a child for a lie I told myself. But you didn't, I reminded him. That's what matters. How did you become so wise? I have really good parents. Also, I read a lot. Books make you smart. Books in the ocean, he agreed. Oh, and the prophecy? Turns out the scholars had been reading it wrong for centuries. Some archaeologists found the full text last year. The real version goes, when the last daughter of Asterion touches forbidden waters beneath alien stars, the old world of isolation dies and gates open to new understanding between the scattered children of Veltos. Basically, it was never about death and portals. It was about integration, about Veltrians learning to live with other species instead of apart from them, about choosing connection over isolation. Mom laughed for 20 minutes when we found out. All that running, all that fear, and the prophecy just wanted us to make friends? To be fair, Dad pointed out, cult leaders aren't known for their reading comprehension skills. The funny thing is, it really did come true. After our story got out, orphaned Veltrian girl, human mechanic, crossed a desert, faced down a cult, found family. Everything changed. Veltrians started integrating more. Humans started learning our customs. The memorial lamps became a symbol of shared grief and shared hope. The ocean where I first played is now called Prophecy Beach, and families come from across the galaxy to let their kids play in the waves. Sometimes I stand on our cliff and watch them. Purple kids and human kids and even some Drelaxian kids with their scale skin all splashing together. The old world really did die. This new one is so much better. But the best part, the absolute, incredible, impossible best part, is this. I have a family, not just people who take care of me. A real family. Dad, who still calls me kiddo and carries me on his shoulders even though I'm definitely too big. I'm not. Mom, who braids my hair every morning and sings the lullaby my birth mother used to sing. Lily, who texts me terrible Earth memes and counts down the days until summer. Even Zarek, who's like the galaxy's saddest but most devoted uncle. When I was 8, paralyzed by fear and poison, I thought being alive was the victory. Now I know better. Being alive was just the beginning. Being loved, stupidly, impossibly, unconditionally loved. That's the real miracle. Being part of something bigger than prophecies or fear or death, that's the gift. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about that scared little girl pretending she couldn't walk, convinced she had to die for some stupid ancient words. I want to tell her, just wait. It gets so much better. You get 2 sisters if you count Lily. You get parents who love you. You get pancakes on the ceiling and races in the ocean and a house full of laughter. You get to be happy. Actually, genuinely, explosively happy. But I can't tell her. She had to walk through the desert to get here. Good thing she had help carrying her. Good thing she still does. If anyone reads this without permission, I'll put sand in your bed. Not a threat. A promise. Ask Lily. She knows. Dad just yelled that dinner's ready. We're having definitely not exploded pasta. Wish me luck. Just looked out my window. The ocean's doing that glow thing. Mom and Dad are on the beach, dancing to no music. Lily's recording them for blackmail. Zarek's next visit is tomorrow. I should sculpt him a new sand statue, maybe one where he's actually smiling this time. Life is weird and perfect in mine. Every Asterian marshal, age 13, definitely not crying while writing this.